June 7th, 1945. A dirt road winds up through the Bavarian Alps, cutting between pine forests so thick the sunlight barely touches the ground. Sergeant Albert Singleton sits in the passenger seat of a half-track, his rifle between his knees, wondering why his commanding officer sent him on this particular errand. Behind him, 2 guards. Beside them, 5 German officers, former Wehrmacht, former enemies, now guides. The war ended a month ago. Hitler's been dead for 5 weeks. But Singleton's about to discover that some wars don't end when the shooting stops. They just change shape. At the top of the pass, 2 trucks are waiting. American trucks, 2.5-ton cargo carriers. And standing next to them, 2 men in American uniforms. Intelligence officers, they say. Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. The ones who do the dirty work nobody talks about. One of them has a map. The other has a knowing smile. And Singleton, a military policeman who spent the last months trying to keep order in a defeated Germany, feels something cold settle in his stomach. This isn't a recovery mission. This is something else entirely. Let's go back. Because to understand how $73 million in Nazi gold vanished without a trace, you need to understand how it got there in the first place. And that story starts 3,000 miles away, in a basement vault in Berlin, on the coldest day of February 1945. The Americans call it a precision strike. 950 B-17 flying fortresses, each one carrying 10,000 pounds of high explosives, carpet bombed the German capital for hours. The city burns, buildings collapse, and among the rubble, the Reichsbank, Germany's central bank, takes 21 direct hits. The roof caves in, the walls crack, and for the first time in 6 years, the vault is exposed to the sky. Inside that vault sits the accumulated wealth of a murderous empire. Not just German gold, the reserves of Belgium, Holland, Austria, Czechoslovakia, gold bars stamped with the eagles of conquered nations, foreign currency by the truckload, and in the corner, stacked in numbered suitcases, the final obscenity: gold teeth, wedding rings, watches, eyeglass frames, the last possessions of people murdered in concentration camps, collected by the SS, melted down, catalogued, stored like inventory in a warehouse. Walter Funk, president of the Reichsbank, knows the game is over. The Soviets are 30 miles from Berlin and closing. The Americans are across the Rhine. If the gold stays here, it's gone, either captured or destroyed in the next bombing raid. So Funk gives the order: move everything. 200 miles southwest to a salt mine in Merkers, Thuringia, a place the bombers can't reach, a place deep enough underground that even if they tried, it wouldn't matter. Between February and March, train after train rolls out of Berlin, carrying the Reich's last treasure. By the time the final shipment arrives at Merkers, 93% of Germany's remaining gold is buried 1,500 feet underground. 250 tons, billions in foreign currency, stolen art from across Europe, and those suitcases. Always those suitcases. April 4th. American soldiers from Patton's Third Army roll into the village of Merkers without firing a shot. The Germans are done fighting. Most of them just want to go home. But 2 French women, displaced persons, slave labourers dragged to Germany to work the factories. They stop a pair of military policemen and tell them something interesting. There's a mine here, and the Germans have been bringing gold into it, truckloads, at night, for months. The MPs reported up the chain. 2 days later, American engineers blow a hole in the vault door. And when Generals Eisenhower, Patton, and Bradley descend into that mine and see 7,000 bags of gold bullion stacked floor to ceiling, they know this is the story that will define the war's end. The proof, undeniable proof of what the Nazi regime really was. A criminal enterprise built on theft and murder. But here's what they don't know. Not all the gold made it to Americas. In the chaos of those final weeks, as Berlin collapsed and Hitler retreated to his bunker, some of the Reichsbank reserves never left the capital. Or if they did, they went somewhere else. Somewhere the Americans wouldn't find them. At least not right away. By late April, Colonel Josef Spasil of the SS, one of Himmler's financial operatives, shows up at the Reichsbank with armed men and takes what's left. Nobody stops him. Nobody even tries. He loads trucks with gold bars, currency, and documents and drives south. Destination: Bavaria, the Alpine fortress. The mountains where true believers think they can hold out. Where the Reich's most loyal soldiers are already digging in for a last stand that will never come. Most of the gold spatial steals ends up in Mittenwald, a postcard-perfect alpine town, the kind of place tourists photograph in peacetime. But in April 1945, it's a military garrison, home to the Mountain Warfare School, where Germany's elite Gebirgsjäger, mountain troops, train for operations in high altitude. The commander is Colonel Franz Wilhelm Pfeiffer, decorated veteran, Knight's Cross recipient, a man who's spent the war leading soldiers through the frozen peaks of the Balkans and the Caucasus. And now, in the war's final week, he's given a new mission, the strangest mission of his career: hide the gold. April 20th, 1945, Hitler's birthday. And in a white-walled office in Mittenwald, Pfeiffer gathers 6 of his most trusted officers. He closes the door, looks each man in the eye, and tells them what's coming. Trucks from Berlin are arriving tonight. $15 million in gold and currency. The remnants of the Reichsbank reserves. Their job is to hide it. All of it. Somewhere in the mountains where the Americans won't find it. Because, Pfeiffer tells them, this gold is going to finance the new Bavarian state. The state that will rise after the Allies leave. After the dust settles. He makes them swear an oath. And then the trucks arrive. The men work in darkness. They load the gold onto mules. Actual mules. Because the mountain trails are too narrow and too steep for vehicles. They hike for hours. Up through forests. Along ridges. To hidden bunkers they've dug in secret over the past few days. One cache goes near Lake Walchen, buried under a fake tree stump. Another in a forester's house in Einsiedel. A third in a remote alpine lodge. They work through the night. By dawn, the gold is gone, vanished into the landscape. And 3 days later, when American forces take Mittenwald without a fight, the treasure is nowhere to be found. But soldiers talk, prisoners talk, and within days, the Americans know the gold is somewhere in these mountains. They bring in intelligence teams, engineers with metal detectors, and they start asking questions. They round up German officers. They interrogate civilians. They offer deals. And slowly, the hiding places are revealed. By early June, American forces have recovered most of it. 728 gold bars, bags of coins, currency. They document everything, photograph the sites, load the gold onto trucks. Destination: Frankfurt, the central depository for captured Nazi assets. Mission accomplished, or so it seems. But the German records don't match. According to the original manifest from Berlin, there should be more, a lot more. At least 2,500 bars, maybe 3,000. And there's something else. Something the German officers mentioned in interrogation. 25 boxes, special boxes, each one containing 4 gold bars, 50 kilograms per box, 1.25 tons total. These boxes were part of the shipment. They were buried with the rest. But when the Americans do the math, those boxes aren't in the count. 728 bars were recovered, but the 25 boxes, gone. This is where Sergeant Singleton comes in. June 7th, 1945. His commanding officer, Captain Edward Craig, tells him to take a few guards, round up some German officers who know the mountains, and go find a cache of gold the intelligence boys heard about. Routine recovery, nothing special. So Singleton loads up the half-track and drives into the mountains. And that's when he meets the 2 OSS agents. They're waiting at the pass, right where the German officers said they'd be, which is odd, because Singleton never told anyone outside his unit where he was going. The OSS men are friendly, professional. They have the right paperwork, the right uniforms. They say they're here to supervise the recovery, make sure everything gets logged properly. Singleton doesn't question it. They're officers. He's a sergeant. That's how the army works. So they hike to the site, a steep incline near a creek. The German officers point to a spot. The Americans start digging, and sure enough, there's a trapdoor, hidden under rocks and dirt. When they lift it, they find a bunker, 12 feet by 12 feet, and inside, stacked from floor to ceiling, gold bars, each one stamped with the Nazi eagle, 40 pounds apiece, hundreds of them. The work takes hours. The bunker is deep, the gold is heavy. So instead of carrying the bars down the mountain, they slide them, one by one, down the slope like sleds. It's backbreaking work. Singleton documents everything, serial numbers, quantities. He takes photographs. The German officers watch. The OSS agents supervise. And when the last bar is loaded onto the trucks, one of the OSS men shakes Singleton's hand and says, "Thank you." The trucks drive off. Singleton and his men head back to base. Job done. The next day, Singleton receives a telegram from divisional headquarters in Munich. The gold has arrived. Everything's accounted for. End of story. Except it's not, because Singleton knows what he saw. He counted the bars. He took the photographs. And when he tries to cross-reference his documentation with the official records, something doesn't add up. The numbers are wrong. Way wrong. The Germans say there were 25 boxes, 100 bars per box, 2,500 bars total. The official American records say 728 bars were recovered from all the sites combined. So where are the other 1,700? Where are the 25 boxes? Singleton starts asking questions. He files reports. He tries to track down the OSS agents, but he hits a wall. The agents, no record of them, no names, no unit assignments, nothing. The trucks they drove, no requisition orders, no transport logs. The gold Singleton loaded that day, according to Munich, it never arrived. Or if it did, it was never registered. The photographs Singleton took? He sends one to his wife in a letter, describing the mission. But the official copies? Missing. The German officers who helped with the recovery? They're released and sent home before anyone can question them further. And just like that, the trail goes cold. Singleton knows what happened. He was there. He loaded the gold himself. But without proof, without documentation, without witnesses who'll talk, there's nothing he can do. The case is quietly closed. And 1.25 tons of Nazi gold, worth £3.5 million British pounds in 1945, worth $73 million today, simply ceases to exist. Officially, it was never there. Officially, it was never found. Officially, there's nothing to investigate. For 12 years, the theft remains a secret. Nobody talks about it. The army doesn't want the scandal. The OSS, which was dissolved at the end of the war and reorganized into the CIA, has no comment. The men who took the gold, whoever they were, disappear into the post-war chaos. Some people think they sold the gold on the black market. Switzerland was happy to buy gold, no questions asked. Others think it was an authorized operation, that the OSS took the gold deliberately on orders from Washington to fund covert operations in the early Cold War. The Soviets were the new enemy. Intelligence agencies needed money, untraceable money. And what better source than Nazi gold that officially didn't exist? There's a darker theory, that the gold never left Bavaria, that it was reburied somewhere in the Alps by a network of former Nazis and corrupt American officers. A hedge against the future, a nest egg for when the smoke cleared and the investigators went home. We'll never know. Because in 1957, the story breaks. Not in a courtroom, not in a congressional hearing, in the Guinness Book of World Records, under the heading, Robbery, Biggest Unsolved. Someone, somewhere, decided the world should know. And the entry reads, the greatest robbery on record was of the German National Gold Reserves in Bavaria by a combined group of US military personnel and German civilians in June 1945. A total of 730 gold bars, together with 6 sacks of banknotes and 25 boxes of platinum bars and precious stones, disappeared in transit. None of those responsible has been brought to trial. The scandal that follows is muted. By 1957, the world has moved on. The Cold War is in full swing. Korea is over. Vietnam is heating up. Nobody wants to dig into what American soldiers did in the chaos of 1945. The investigation that eventually happens is half-hearted. Witnesses are interviewed. Reports are filed. But everyone who could answer the important questions is either dead, disappeared, or silent. Captain Craig, who gave Singleton the order, was never formally questioned. Singleton himself gave testimony years later, but by then, it was too late. The statute of limitations had run out. The case was closed. And the gold? It could be anywhere. Melted down decades ago, sitting in a Swiss vault under a false name, buried in a cave somewhere in the Alps, waiting for someone who will never come back. Or maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what the OSS agent said it was. An authorized black operation. The gold spirited away to fund the secret wars America was about to fight. Wars that needed money Congress would never approve. Wars that couldn't leave a paper trail. We'll never know. Because the men who would know are gone. And the records, if they ever existed, have long since been destroyed or classified so deep that nobody will see them in our lifetime. What we're left with is this: $73 million in gold, taken from the Bavarian mountains in June 1945, loaded onto trucks by American soldiers, and never seen again. Not a conspiracy theory, not a legend, a documented fact, the greatest unsolved robbery in history, and it was pulled off not by criminals, but by men in uniform Men who took advantage of chaos, of exhausted bureaucracy, of a world too tired to ask hard questions. They stole justice. They stole restitution. They took gold that should have been returned to the families of Holocaust victims, to the nations that had been occupied and destroyed. And they pocketed it. Sergeant Singleton lived the rest of his life knowing what he saw. He told his story to researchers. He shared his photographs. He did everything he could to make sure people knew the truth. But in the end, it didn't matter. Because the system he served, the army he believed in, decided that some questions are better left unanswered. Some crimes are too embarrassing to prosecute. Some thieves wear the same uniform you do. The British researcher Ian Sayer spent 9 years of his life tracking down every lead. He interviewed survivors. He dug through archives. He found documents that had been buried for decades. In 1984, he published his findings in a book called Nazi Gold. He proved the theft happened. He proved the cover-up existed. He even found 2 bars of gold hidden in a German bank vault that matched the serial numbers from the Mittenwald cache. 2 bars out of 2,000, a drop in the ocean. The rest? Still missing, still out there, somewhere. Here's what keeps me up at night. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision. This wasn't a few soldiers filling their pockets and running. This was organised. The OSS agents knew where to be. They knew when to be there. They had trucks. They had paperwork. They had a plan. Which means someone, somewhere, gave orders. Someone looked at a map of Nazi gold caches and drew a circle around one of them and said, "This one's ours. This one doesn't go on the books." And whoever that person was, they got away with it. Because 79 years later, we still don't know their name. The gold may be gone. The thieves may be dead. But the crime remains unsolved, unpunished, a wound that never healed. And every time you hear about lost Nazi treasure, every time someone talks about gold trains, or buried caches, or secret Swiss accounts, remember this: the biggest theft didn't involve a train. It didn't involve a secret tunnel or a coded map. It involved 2 trucks, a handful of soldiers, and the simple, brutal truth that when nobody's watching, anyone can be a thief. Even the good guys. If this story made you angry, if it reminded you that history isn't just about heroes and villains, but about the people who fall somewhere in between, then like this video. Share it. Make sure people know that the greatest robbery in history was committed by men who were supposed to be the liberators. Every share, every like, is a reminder that we can't let crimes like this fade into footnotes. Subscribe to this channel. We're not here to tell you comfortable stories. We're here to tell you the truth, even when it's ugly. Especially when it's ugly. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and if you know anything about missing Nazi gold, if your grandfather told stories, if you've heard rumors, share them, because somewhere out there, the truth is still waiting, and maybe, just maybe, someone knows where it is.